I remember that morning like it was yesterday. The sky was a pale blue dome, so clear it seemed to hum, and the air up on the mountain pass had that thin, clean edge that made you feel sharper just breathing it. We'd driven as far as the gravel road allowed, and then hiked the last stretch to the plateau. Our packs heavy, but our spirits high. There were 5 of us. Me, a teacher named Claire who joined the trip solo, a couple from Oregon named Jeff and Lena, and old Marty, who'd spent more nights in a tent than in a house by the sound of his stories. The place looked like something from another world, a high saddle between 2 peaks, the kind of spot where you could watch storms form 100 miles away. The meadow rolled out like green velvet, dotted with tiny yellow alpine flowers, and a stream, cold as melted glass, wound its way through before spilling into a drop so sheer it made your knees hum just to look over the edge. We made camp near the rocks, where the wind broke and the ground was flat. That first evening, we built a fire ring from stones and sat shoulder to shoulder, watching the light fade behind the peaks. You could see forever up there. When darkness fell, the stars came out like someone had spilled a jar of glitter across the sky. The world below was gone. No towns, no lights. Just the flicker of the fire and the sound of the stream whispering through the meadow. It felt like we were standing at the top of everything, far beyond the reach of ordinary life. Morning came with a hush. Even the wind was still. The plan was to break camp the next day and descend through the western slope, a route Marty knew well. But that afternoon, the air began to change. Soft at first, then heavy. Clouds built up fast, swallowing the sunlight until the pass looked dim and strange. I remember the first flakes drifting down, lazy and harmless. We laughed about it, pulling out mugs of coffee, saying we'd have a postcard snow before packing up. But within an hour, the snow turned serious, thick, driving, relentless. It came down so hard that by dusk, the trail markers had vanished. We huddled by the fire, listening to the storm close around us like a fist. By nightfall, it was clear. We weren't going anywhere. The pass had become a white ocean, and our only choice was to ride it out. I remember that morning like it was yesterday. The sky was a pale blue dome, so clear it seemed to hum, and the air up on the mountain pass had that thin, clean edge that made you feel sharper just breathing it. We'd driven as far as the gravel road allowed, and then hiked the last stretch to the plateau, our packs heavy but our spirits high. There were 5 of us. Me, a teacher named Claire who joined the trip solo, a couple from Oregon named Jeff and Lena, and old Marty, who'd spent more nights in a tent than in a house by the sound of his stories. The place looked like something from another world, a high saddle between 2 peaks, the kind of spot where you could watch storms form 100 miles away. The meadow rolled out like green velvet, dotted with tiny yellow alpine flowers, and a stream, cold as melted glass, wound its way through before spilling into a drop so sheer it made your knees hum just to look over the edge. We made camp near the rocks, where the wind broke and the ground was flat. That first evening, we built a fire ring from stones and sat shoulder to shoulder watching the light fade behind the peaks. You could see forever up there. When darkness fell, the stars came out like someone had spilled a jar of glitter across the sky. The world below was gone. No towns, no lights, just the flicker of the fire and the sound of the stream whispering through the meadow. It felt like we were standing at the top of everything, far beyond the reach of ordinary life. Morning came with a hush. Even the wind was still. The plan was to break camp the next day and descend through the western slope, a route Marty knew well. But that afternoon, the air began to change, soft at first, then heavy. Clouds built up fast, swallowing the sunlight until the pass looked dim and strange. I remember the first flakes drifting down, lazy and harmless. We laughed about it, pulling out mugs of coffee, saying we'd have a postcard snow before packing up. But within an hour, the snow turned serious, thick, driving, relentless. It came down so hard that by dusk, the trail markers had vanished. We huddled by the fire, listening to the storm close around us like a fist. By nightfall, it was clear. We weren't going anywhere. The pass had become a white ocean, and our only choice was to ride it out. By morning, the world had been remade. The meadow where we'd pitched our tents was gone, buried under a smooth, glittering crust of snow that reached nearly to our knees. The fire pit was just a faint rise beneath the white, and our boots froze stiff where we'd left them. The wind had died, leaving behind a silence so complete it pressed on the ears. For a few moments, none of us spoke. It was beautiful in that eerie, merciless way that only mountains can be. Pure, brilliant, and utterly indifferent to us. Then Marty broke the spell. "We'll wait it out a day," he said, squinting toward the ridge. "Sun'll come back, melt enough to get down." We all wanted to believe him. We spent the morning digging out gear, shaking snow from tarps, checking that no tent poles had snapped. Our rations, intended for one more night, suddenly looked meagre. Oats, jerky, some coffee, and a few freeze-dried meals. Not dire, not yet, but thin if the weather held. Claire started a small fire with dry twigs she'd stored in her pack, her hands steady, even though her lips were blue. She had a quiet strength about her, the kind that doesn't need to talk much. Jeff and Lena huddled in their tent, arguing softly about whether we should try the descent anyway. The trail to the west dropped steeply through switchbacks, hugging the cliff face. In dry weather, it was hard enough. In a foot of snow, invisible under fresh powder, it would be a suicide run. Marty just shook his head. "You try that," he said, "and you'll end up in the ravine. We stay." The hours dragged. We built a windbreak from snow and stretched a tarp over it, a kind of communal shelter. The fire became our anchor, a flickering heart in a white, formless world. We took turns feeding it, sitting close, talking about nothing and everything. Where we came from, what we'd do when we got back. Time lost its edges up there. The storm never truly stopped. It just shifted moods, pausing, then whispering down again like ash. That night, as we lay in our tents, I heard the muffled creak of the snow settling. It sounded like the mountain breathing, slow and deep. Sometime before dawn, I woke to a faint sound. Water, but not from the stream. It was coming from above. I crawled out into the cold and saw it. A wall of snow higher up the slope, cracked like a split loaf of bread, ready to slide. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the enormity of it, the fragility of our little camp below. Then I went to wake the others. We scrambled fast once I got everyone up. The air was still thick with snow, but the crack above us had widened overnight, and every few minutes, a dull thunk echoed across the slope, chunks breaking loose somewhere higher. Marty took one long look at it and swore softly under his breath. "She's gonna slide," he said. His voice was calm, but I saw the calculation in his eyes, the distance, the weight, the line of descent. "Pack light, move to the rocks," he ordered. We tore down what we could, leaving behind tents and anything heavy. It wasn't panic, not yet, but the kind of urgency that makes your hands shake. We made it to the boulder field just as the sun broke through a thin veil of clouds. For a few seconds, the whole pass glowed gold. Then, the mountain gave way. It started as a hiss, then a roar, like 1,000 trains coming at once. Snow, rocks, bits of ice, all of it thundered past the edge of our camp in a rushing wave. We pressed ourselves against the stones, the air thick with powder and cold grit. When it finally quieted, the place where we'd been camping was gone. Just a blank slope of debris, smooth and glittering in the sun. For a while, no one spoke. The silence that followed that avalanche was the heaviest thing I've ever heard. We took stock. Everyone was safe, but our food cache buried. The sled, the tents, the fire ring, all gone. What we carried was all we had. A few packets of jerky, half a bag of oats, some coffee grounds, and a dented pot. It hit us all at once how small that was against the days that might lie ahead. Marty's face was set like stone. "We ration," he said simply. "Half portions. One hot meal every 2 days. Snow for water." No one argued. Even Jeff, who had been restless at the start, just nodded. That night, we huddled under the tarp stretched between 2 rocks, the fire barely big enough to warm our boots. The stars came back, sharp and infinite. But they didn't bring comfort now. They made us feel exposed, like the world had stepped back to watch what we'd do. Claire passed around a tin cup of watered-down coffee, and Lena leaned against Jeff's shoulder without speaking. The rest of us sat quiet, staring into the coals. It was then that I realized something subtle had shifted among us. The strangers I'd met just days earlier were gone, replaced by companions, people bound not by friendship yet, but by survival. There was a strange steadiness in that thought, a kind of peace. We were small, cold, and hungry, but we were still here, and as long as the fire held, we'd keep it that way. The next few days blurred together, a rhythm of cold and waiting. We melted snow for water and kept the fire alive using bits of broken branches and splinters from the rock ledge. Every scrap mattered. When the storm clouds rolled back, the world turned blinding. Sunlight glancing off the snowfields until your eyes watered behind half-frozen lids. We took turns scouting for signs of the trail, but the pass was transformed, unfamiliar. Landmarks we'd relied on were buried or shifted. What had been a narrow descent toward the valley now looked like a sheer wall of white. Marty marked each day by scratching lines on a flat rock. By the 4th, our food bag was nearly empty. The jerky ration had dwindled to slivers, and the oatmeal had to be stretched thin with melted snow until it tasted like ash. We'd started boiling pine needles for tea, just to trick our stomachs into feeling full. Spirits stayed steady though, helped by Claire's quiet resolve. Every morning, she'd hum softly as she brewed the weak tea, a sound that somehow kept the frost from creeping into our thoughts. Jeff grew restless first. He hated the waiting. He kept saying that we could make it down if we just followed the creek bed. "It's all downhill," he insisted. "The snow will pack better down there." Marty shut him down each time, pointing out that a hidden crevasse or another slide could bury us. But Jeff wouldn't let it go. On the 5th morning, while we were checking the fire, he strapped on his pack and announced he was going. Lena tried to stop him, grabbed his sleeve, begged, but he kissed her forehead, promised to come back with help, and walked into the glare. We watched him shrink into the white until he was gone. The hours after that were the longest of my life. The wind picked up again, erasing his tracks before noon. By evening, snow had begun to fall anew. Lena sat close to the fire, staring at the spot where he'd vanished. No one spoke. We just listened to the storm, the tarp flapping like a sail over our heads. When darkness fell, we could hear the distant rumble of snow shifting somewhere far off. the same.
Sound we'd heard before the avalanche.
Marty tightened the guy lines, muttering, "He'll find shelter. He knows better than to move in this." None of us slept much that night. The cold sank deeper than before, and I couldn't stop thinking about Jeff, alone out there under that endless white. It's strange how quickly courage can turn into fear when the world grows that quiet. By morning, the snow had stopped again, leaving a brittle stillness behind. The fire had burned to coals, and the air smelled faintly of pine smoke and frost. I crawled out first, squinting at the blinding slope. There were no new tracks, no sign of Jeff. The emptiness of it all, the clean, untouched snow where he should have been, sent a cold shiver through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. Lena came out next, her face pale, eyes hollow. She didn't ask, and I didn't have to answer. We both knew. Marty called us together. "We wait one more day," he said. His voice cracked a little, though he tried to hide it. "If it clears, we move east instead of down. The ridge might catch the sun sooner, maybe melt through to rock." None of us had a better plan, so we agreed. That day we scavenged what we could from the debris, bits of rope, a half-buried pot, and by some miracle, a tin of peanut butter wedged between rocks. It felt like treasure. We shared it that night, each of us taking a spoonful, and for a moment, we even laughed. When dawn came, a thin mist was lifting from the valley below, and for the first time in nearly a week, we saw colour. Dark patches of rock, glints of ice water trickling down through cracks. The sun was finally doing its work. Marty grinned, teeth white against his beard. "Time to move," he said. We packed what little we had left and began the climb towards the eastern ridge. The snow crusted under our boots, hard enough to walk on without sinking. It was slow going, but it felt like forward motion, and that was enough. By mid-afternoon we reached the crest. From there, we could see the valley floor, forests, a frozen lake, and far in the distance, a dark smudge that might have been a ranger outpost. The sight hit me like warmth spreading through my chest. We built a signal fire from dry brush, feeding it until it roared against the wind. Hours later, as twilight settled, we saw a flicker of light returning from the valley. 3 flashes, then a pause, then 3 more. Someone had seen us. Rescue came the next day by snowmobile, roaring up through the pass like a miracle. They found Jeff's body 2 miles below, half buried near a frozen stream. Lena didn't cry. She just stood still as the rescuers lifted him out. Later, as the helicopter rose, the camp shrinking beneath us, I looked back at that mountain. It was silent again, perfect and merciless. Even now, years later, I can still feel that hush, the way the wind held its breath after the storm. Sometimes, when life feels too loud, I close my eyes and remember that place. The cold, the fear, and the fragile warmth of strangers who became something more than that. Survival, I've learned, isn't just about staying alive. It's about holding on to each other when the world turns to silence.